Okay, so I'm here with Jim Webb, who is an incumbent running for reelection for the CPP School Board. Jim, if you could just give us a quick introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I've been a member, me and my wife, members of the community for 26 years. Uh, Moved here from Ohio to take a job with Corning, not unlike many of people out there. And actually, I say started in education well before that. So I had education as a passion as I was going through college and a lot of outreach programs. And as soon as we moved into Corning, certainly kids came into the picture and joined the board of Christ Church Daycare on First Street. So was supportive of the board, worked there for quite a few years, and then there's an opportunity to join the board in Corning. I think I was inspired by some work that I had done with the not many people know about that exists is the Corning Painted Post School Board Education Foundation. And so through that, learned more of the inner workings of the school district and decided to put my hat in the ring to run. And that was 15 years ago. So certainly have learned a lot since. The school district has changed tremendously since then. So that brings us
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, and what's the biggest difference between, I mean, that's a long tenure on the school board. What have you seen kind of evolve over your tenure?
So certainly facilities, right? So that's been the biggest and most visible aspect of it is a dramatic transformation of our facilities. Still more work to do to complete that. What happened behind the scenes was a significant change in the operation of the school board with the superintendent, and it moved to what I would call a high performing team where we are pretty open and frank with each other and discuss ideas with the superintendent. Essentially, even though we hire the superintendent, more in a peer-based relationship where we're able to give and receive feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, and thinking about where we are now post pandemic, and a couple years out, and everything that you kind of went through and watched the district go through, as many districts did around the country. How do you feel about the position that the school district is in today in 2023, and what are some of the things that you're kind of talking about and dealing with
Mm-hmm.
at present?
So I think the thing there on many people's minds is the learning loss that occurred through the pandemic and just the let's call it imperfect access of students to teachers and the socialization. So that is certainly correcting itself. It's not perfect in terms of, how long does it take? But one thing that I will say moved forward tremendously was the organizational empathy for students in the district and teachers getting a look into the homes. Let's just say cameo appearances by parents and things like that when the students are online presented a view of the student that was much more whole than what you see in these, when they're present in the classroom. And I think empathy was a big piece of what we learned as a school district to say, okay, yes, there are things that we can still learn here and improve how we bring education to our students.
Now, for those who don't know, of course, all the school board meetings are open to the public unless you're in executive session. But there's not ever a major turnout to the school board meetings. So, how would you describe just sort of your day to day as a board member and the things that you would kind of take care of during a general meeting and even in
Sure.
between meetings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess for people who are think that the board is all powerful, it's really the collective nine that speak, and individuals on the board functionally have no power other than to lobby, organize like anybody else will. And you look at the primary functions of the school board, right? Probably the biggest function is to set policy, right? So that big, huge, thick book of policies, and a lot of people don't read, but certainly affects the operation of the district. That is essentially the core of the work of the school board, is to work with the superintendent to agonize over the language that goes into those, and then ultimately approve those policies, which become essentially the guiding documents for employees of the school district.
Do you
The
have any examples of the policies that have recently been implemented or the things that you've been
oh,
discussing in the
sure.
past six
So
or 12
yep.
months?
Um, so there are, let's just say, regular policies. So we review the policies on a 3-year cycle. So they go through the board. They go initially through the policy committee, then they come to the board. So every 3 years, we will actually go through the entire list of policies in the book, which is quite a bit. And then there are going to be adaptations of those policies. Some of them are updates in terms of language. Um, and certainly there's been a lot of attention to the behavior pieces of the policies, and some of those are the code of conduct, like actually come up on a yearly approval basis for us. We look at our policies dealing with curriculum implementation and review, so those are things that we pay attention to. But they span the gamut from things in a, like I call, a very positive nature in terms of how we develop and implement curriculum, to things that are more on the negative side. How do we manage discipline? And and those come up on a regular basis.
Okay. And how do you deal with questions like as individual concerns come up from parents, or
Mm-hmm.
it might be faculty or community members or anyone? How do you deal with sort of those individual concerns as they come up and make their way up to the board level?
Yep. So it it depends on the route that it comes through, right? So if I receive them um, as an individual board member, I will take the opportunity to interact with that parent or community member and kind of drive them in a direction of who they should be contacting to solve their problem. And a lot of times it's clarification. It's simply, I don't know who to talk to, but I know who Jim is. So I'm going to call Jim and he'll let me know. And encourage them to work through the chain of command of the school district. And it's like, if you're having a problem with the teacher, start with the teacher, work up through the principal, um, superintendent, if it's the athletic director, if it's in that space, but work through a chain of command that makes sense. And if that doesn't work, it naturally actually rises to the board level. And if you've exhausted and gone all the way to superintendent, okay, let us know. And one thing that I do is, when issues come up, I make sure the rest of the board actually knows that this is going on. So one of the things that you want to do as a board is make sure everybody's working with the same set of information and data. So we share these things.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine then, sort of in between board meetings, that you hear a lot from friends, community members, families. Now that you've been on the board yourself for a few terms, that you would have some recognition as someone to go to in the community. Do people take advantage of that?
Um, Sometimes they have expectations, but I have boundaries that I'm not afraid um, to push back on, saying, "Hey, this is something I can't do." I've gotten into
Sure.
some amazing discussions with people. It's like, if you want to sit here and actually have a discussion about policy, I'm more than happy to have it with you one on one. So I understand your position on the issue, and so that you understand mine. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to do everything I can to change um, uh, the status quo in the school district so it fits your views. But I will engage you in dialogue so there is a more understanding. So I've had some really interesting dialogues with people that have, different opinions than I do.
Which is great. Yeah. And why is it that you're running for reelection again? As you know, as an incumbent and getting back on there, what do you enjoy about the work?
So what I enjoy about the work is from the mission perspective, right? Certainly, I've been involved in education for probably approaching 4 decades now in terms of volunteering, and I have a fundamental belief that education is a great equalizer. It's what everybody, especially public education, people should have access to it. It should be good. It should serve all students, not just one group of students. It should serve those kids that excel, those kids that are in the need, those kids that have special needs. We should support them all. They have things that they can bring to society that are beneficial,
Mhm.
and and I know it's hard for a public school district to do that and to um, build an education system that, I mean, it's easy to teach to the mean and just, okay, we're going to do this. And then the people in all these other different little tails don't get the full value. But to allow each
Yeah.
student to reach their potential is something that we should strive for. Are we there yet? I don't think so. I think we certainly still have more work to do. But that's fundamentally why I'm here, is to help that occur. Sometimes
Well, and I
it's as simple as supporting the superintendent, hiring the right superintendent. Sometimes it's talking to parents and having them understand more about the education system.
And I have to say, like, I really appreciate the work that you have done so far. I think you've been doing a great job at that, and I'm glad to see that you're still, digging in and willing to do that. And just to dispel any rumors before we wrap up the conversation, your name is Jim Webb, but you didn't invent a James Webb telescope that's out there and producing fantastic images. Is that right?
No, that is yes, that's not the same guy. So that was James E. Webb. I shared the middle initial with him, who was the administrator of NASA, and so he's been recognized by having his name put on the telescope. So that is not me. I clearly have not risen to those levels of greatness.
Well, James E. Webb is a great name, anyways, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and just share a little bit about your tenure and appreciate all that you're doing in the community.